Disco Elysium is my favorite game of all time. It has the best writing I've ever seen in any form of media ever, and it's pure art to me, but I'm not going to be playing Zero Parades, which is the new game from Zome, the studio behind Disco Elysium. As of today, we're less than 2 weeks away from the release of Zero Parades for Dead Spies, the next big RPG from the creators of Disco Elysium, as the game's Steam page states. Should I be feeling excited? Start counting down the days? Well, I'm not. I actually sat down and played the demo for an hour to record footage for this video. I can't lie and say I wasn't happy to be back in a world that felt so familiar. I've been yearning for a new game like this, and I really missed the world of Disco. But also, I wasn't instantly drawn in. Things felt off. The dialogue didn't flow as easily, and it felt more like a clone than a successor. And my madness at Zome for taking away the possibility of an actual Disco Elysium 2 just outweighs any other feelings I have. I also saw quite a few of my Steam friends have this game wishlisted, and it made me realize not everyone is probably aware of the mess that happened behind the scenes at Zome. I decided to make a video to hopefully inform some of you and to discuss whether Zero Parades can ever separate itself from this whole mess, even if it ends up being a great game. I also want to talk about how ironic this situation is and how it almost feels like an event from Disco Elysium. There is something deeply wrong with a studio using the success of a game about the failures of capitalism to allegedly defraud the very people who created it. Don't you think? I'm torn because I know the developers who actually built Zero Parades are talented people that worked on this day in and day out for years and probably did their best. It feels like disrespecting them and their work to completely ignore this game. But also, they already got paid during the development of the game, and the money from my purchase doesn't go to them. It goes to Zome. I'm gonna talk more about this in a bit. But first, for those of you who aren't aware of what went on behind the scenes, I'm gonna attempt a quick summary. This is a long story and there are many documentaries on YouTube that I highly recommend if you want the full story. My goal here isn't to make another documentary, but rather to share the necessary context before the game's launch to inform people and to actually discuss the ethics of playing it. Let's quickly go back to the very beginning. Zome first started as a cultural collective in Estonia. It was a group of writers, musicians, and artists living in a shared flat, broke, and trying to build a world they called Elysium. Robert Kurwitz, the lead writer and designer, spent a decade building the lore of this world in his head before it ever became a video game. He brought in Alexander Rostov for the art and Helen Hindper for the writing, and they were the heart of the operation. They were what made Disco Elysium, Disco Elysium. But of course, to make a game of that scale, you need capital, and that's where the suits came in. In 2016, they brought in investors, and at the time, it seemed like a necessary deal to get their vision funded. Disco Elysium was a massive success. Everyone was talking about it. It made millions. But as soon as the money started rolling in, the people who actually created the soul of the game were suddenly in the way of the people who owned the company. The fallout began in late 2022. Martin Luiga, a founding member of the collective, announced that the core team had been forced out. Robert Kurwitz, Alexander Rostov, and Helen Hindper were gone. Of course, the studio's management tried to control the narrative. They claimed the creators were fired for misconduct and for creating a toxic work environment, but the creators told a much darker story. They said they were being pushed out so the majority shareholders could take control of the IP and the profits. And then came the lawsuit. Kurwitz and Rostov alleged that the company had essentially been stolen from itself through a fraudulent money loop. According to the court documents, Ilmar Kompos used a shell company to buy concept art sketches and a short story intended for Disco Elysium sequel from Zome for almost nothing. He then allegedly sold those same sketches back to Zome for 4.8 million euros. He used the company's own cash to buy the company's majority shares. The money was eventually paid back and the lawsuits were settled or withdrawn under NDAs, but of course the damage was permanent. The creators were officially locked out of the very house they built. By early 2024, the situation got even bleaker. Reports started coming out that Zome was laying off a quarter of its staff. They cancelled a standalone expansion for Disco Elysium that was reportedly close to completion. They also scrapped a direct sequel. One source from inside the studio told the press that management had turned Zome into a cold corporate machine. They weren't interested in the disco spirit anymore. They wanted something they could control without the troublesome original writers. And now here we are in 2026. Less than 2 weeks away from Zome's new game, Zero Parades for Dead Spies. Even the name sounds like something right out of Disco Elysium, doesn't it? So this is an espionage RPG set in the city of Portofino. It looks like Disco Elysium, it has the isometric view, it has the internal dialogue, it even has a conditioning system that is clearly just a thought cabinet with a new name. And they even chose to use the "from the creators of Disco Elysium" path, even though the actual creators are long gone. All the writing I've seen so far and what I experienced in that hour of the demo felt really weird. It felt like it was trying too hard to be Disco Elysium. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure the writers are all very talented, obviously, but they aren't the ones who spent basically all their adult life dreaming up the world of Revachol. They aren't the same brains who wrote the amazing piece of art that is Disco Elysium. So trying to create the same feeling with similar words just doesn't work. It just feels off. And the irony is brutal. Disco Elysium was a game that deeply understood how capital consumes art and how systems crush individuals. Now, the studio that owns that name is a perfect example of exactly that. It's such a disco thing to happen. One of the writers for the game, Honey Watson, said this in a Polygon interview. Zero Parades drew its inspiration from a variety of places, Ursula K. Le Guin and Thomas Pynchon to name a few, but its most central influence is John le Carré. The spy novelist has a more cerebral approach to espionage compared to the power fantasy of James Bond, and that was a fit for the story Zome wanted to tell. It's a game about an ordinary person doing sneaky, horrible things. Really, Zome? You wanted to tell a story about an ordinary person doing sneaky, horrible things? This game is a product of a hostile takeover. It's a game about dead spies made by a studio that killed the projects people actually wanted forever. Even if the writing is sharp and the mechanics are good, there is a fundamental lack of soul that comes from knowing the history. I just don't think I can play this game without feeling like I'm complicit in the corporate hollow out of my favorite piece of media. And one of the most uncomfortable things about looking at Zero Parades is how much it looks like a mirror. It uses the same painterly textures, a very similar UI, and the same isometric framing that made Disco Elysium so unique, which, I can understand if they're inspired by this game or whatever, but there is a difference between a style that evolves naturally and a style that is being used as a disguise. When I watched the trailer and played the demo, it immediately felt like the game was trying to prove something. It was trying to convince us that the disco soul is still there just because the paint looks the same, but art is more than just a brushstroke. In Disco Elysium, the art was a direct extension of the world's decay and the creator's specific weird obsessions. In Zero Parades, the art feels more like a corporate mandate. I'm sorry, but it feels like the new management told the artists to make it look like the hit we already own. And isn't that kind of the opposite of art? An imitation of a feeling rather than the feeling itself. As I already said, even the dialogue feels like it's trying way too hard. Yes, it hits the same cynical, surrealist notes, but it lacks the actual vulnerability that made Harry or Kim feel like real people. Again, I'm sure the writers are really talented. I'm more blaming the studio here. And here's the question I've been asking myself a lot lately. What if when Zero Parades comes out, it's actually good? What if it's a masterpiece even? And the answer I keep coming back to is that with everything going on with Zone, I don't think the quality of the game even matters. Even if this game is brilliant, I can't separate it from the history of how it was made. And I don't think anyone who actually understood Disco Elysium can as well. I mean, what? If the game is good, are people suddenly gonna ignore the whole scandal and the fact that the original creators were locked out of their own creation? If I give my support to this studio, I'm saying that the behind the scenes stuff is just noise. I'm saying that as long as I get something fun to play with, I don't care if the creators were defrauded, and that feels like a betrayal of Disco Elysium itself. How can I claim to relate so heavily to a game that spends 30 hours criticizing the cruelty of capital and the soullessness of corporate structures only to turn around and hand my money to a studio that embodies those exact things? I see Disco Elysium everywhere in this game, and that's exactly why I can't enjoy it. It's a constant reminder of everything that was lost. I've also been seeing some people say that we should support the game for the sake of the developers that worked hard on it, and because they deserve to have their work seen. And while I can kinda understand that, again, are we supposed to completely forget about what happened to the original creators and support this studio? Plus, those developers already got their paychecks, they were paid for their work during the development cycle, and now the profit from the sales of Zero Parades will go to the management. The same management that did all of this. The people at the top who turned a creative collective into a corporate lawsuit factory. So buying the game isn't really gonna help the person who coded the pathfinding or the person who drew the background art. I mean, hell, even that person probably feels bad for having to work there. Also, supporting this game tells the story that they can literally fire the creators, keep the IP, and people will still somehow open their wallets. I've also been really thinking about if it's even possible to separate the art from the theft when the art is literally a product of that theft. Can you enjoy the conditioning system without thinking about the fact that it exists because the original thought cabinet was seized by a board of directors? And believe me, I don't want to see these people's hard work fail. I don't want to root for a project people gave their years to crash just because the CEOs are horrible. But this is the trap the corporate machine sets for us, isn't it? They happily hide behind the labor of good people to protect themselves from criticism. They count on our empathy for the talented workers to keep the profit margins high. At the end of the day, I've decided that I personally won't be playing Zero Parades. I just don't see the point in it. I might play it out of curiosity sometime in the future, like years and years later, I don't even know, and that would be if I find it for like 90% discounted. But as of now, me playing the game at launch would just mean supporting it, helping to share it, contributing to the numbers on the charts, and I don't want to do that. Also, if I play it and it's bad, I'll just be more annoyed. If I play it and it's good, I'll feel like I'm complicit in a heist. There's no version of this where I walk away feeling the way I did when I finished Disco Elysium. That game was a miracle because it felt like a group of people shouting something they genuinely believed into a void, and frankly, Zero Parades feels like a company whispering something they think I want to hear, so I'll give them my money. I just don't need a spiritual successor that looks like the original but lacks the heart. I'd rather remember Revachol for everything it was than visit another attempt of it called Portofino. I know some of you will still play it, and I'm not here to tell you that you're a bad person if you do. The yearning for that specific feeling is real, and I felt it too during my hour with the demo. But also, I think the correct thing to do is clear. Otherwise, did you even understand Disco Elysium? If you played and loved Disco Elysium, I think the decision is already there. For me, the connection is broken and I see absolutely no point in playing it. You simply can't make a game about the human soul and expect us to ignore that the soul of the studio was sold off years ago. And you know, if you feel the same, good news, there are already other CRPGs out there similar similar to Disco Elysium, like Esoteric Ebb, which is a new game that I've heard nothing but praise for, and I really want to play it here on my channel soon, or Citizen Sleeper, which I adore. It's seriously amazingly written. There are many more other good games that will make you feel a similar way, either with the story they tell or with a realistic flowed character writing, even if they aren't CRPGs and are completely different genres. Basically, my point is there are other choices that were made by much nicer companies. Let me know if you'd enjoy a disco-like game recommendations video, by the way. I'd be happy to put a list together for both myself and for you. In the end, Zome is just a name on a legal document now. The soul, the writers, the artists, the disco is somewhere else. Maybe you can find it in other games, or maybe it's just waiting to be born in a shared flat in Estonia all over again. But something is certain, it isn't in Portofino, and that's enough reason for me to stay away.